The Galactic Council chambers stretched beyond what most minds could comprehend, a crystalline dome suspended in the void between stars. Representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered in their designated atmospheric bubbles, each species breathing their preferred mix of gases while conducting the business of civilized space. Ambassador Chen Wei floated in Earth's modest section, her magnetic boots keeping her anchored to the polished metal floor. Around her, the translucent barrier hummed softly, maintaining the oxygen-nitrogen mixture that kept her alive among beings who breathed methane, sulfur compounds, or pure energy. The Zephyrian Prime Minister, a towering insectoid creature with wings that shimmered like oil on water, called the session to order. His voice carried through the universal translators with the authority of someone who had witnessed the rise and fall of dozen civilizations. We gather today to address the growing concern of humanity's expansion, the Prime Minister announced, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's ethereal light. In merely 3 centuries since first contact, they have established colonies on 47 worlds and show no signs of slowing their territorial acquisition. Chen felt her jaw tighten. Territorial acquisition, as if humans were some plague spreading across the galaxy, instead of explorers seeking new homes for their growing population. The Thrakari delegate, a slug-like being whose slime trail left phosphorescent patterns on his platform, pulsed with agreement. The Thrakari collective has observed this species with great concern. They reproduce at an alarming rate and consume resources with reckless abandon. Their mining operations on Kepler 442b have already depleted the planet's rare Earth deposits. Because we actually use them, Chen muttered under her breath, knowing her words wouldn't carry beyond her barrier. The Thrakari had sat on those deposits for 6,000 years, declaring them sacred while never bothering to extract a single gram. The ethereal conclave's representative, a being of pure light and consciousness, spoke next. Their voice resonated like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The humans possess a troubling tendency toward violence. Their history is written in blood, and they bring this aggression wherever they venture. The incident at Proxima Station demonstrates their inability to resolve conflicts through peaceful means. Chen's hands clenched into fists. The incident at Proxima Station. They made it sound like humans had started the conflict, conveniently forgetting that the Korthak raiders had been terrorizing trade routes for months before Captain Rodriguez and his crew finally put an end to their piracy. Furthermore, the ethereal continued, they refuse to accept the guidance of elder species. They question our wisdom, challenge our methods, and show little respect for traditions that have maintained galactic peace for millennia. The Vorthan Empire's speaker, a reptilian humanoid with scales that shifted color with his emotions, leaned forward. The Empire has tried to establish proper diplomatic protocols with these humans. They ignore our caste systems, speak directly to our leaders without proper intermediaries, and worst of all, they treat their own leaders as equals rather than divine beings worthy of worship. Chen almost laughed at that one. The Vorthan caste system was so rigid that a being born into the lowest tier would spend their entire life performing the same menial task their ancestors had done for 10,000 years. The idea that humans might find such a system objectionable apparently never occurred to them. The accusations continued for hours. Humans were too adaptable, settling on worlds that other species deemed uninhabitable. They were too curious, always asking questions and pushing boundaries. They were too innovative, developing new technologies that disrupted established trade relationships. They were too emotional, forming bonds across species lines without regard for genetic or cultural compatibility. Each criticism felt like a knife to Chen's heart, not because they were untrue, but because they were being twisted into weapons. Yes, humans were adaptable. They had to be. Coming from a world that had tried to kill them with ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and asteroid impacts. Yes, they were curious. How else could they have gone from cave paintings to starships in 10,000 years? Yes, they formed emotional bonds easily. It was how they had survived as a species, building communities and civilizations while other creatures remained locked in endless cycles of predation and prey. The Prime Minister raised one of his forearms for silence. The proposal before us today is simple. Humanity must be contained before their expansion threatens the stability of our ancient order. We propose a quarantine zone around their current territories, with strict limitations on further colonization and technology sharing. A cage, Chen said. her voice cutting through the chamber's murmur. Every eye, sensor, and consciousness turned toward the small human female floating in her transparent prison. You want to put humanity in a cage because we don't fit your idea of how a species should behave. The Prime Minister's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Ambassador Chen, your species has had the privilege of joining this council despite your relatively recent emergence into galactic society. We are offering guidance, not punishment. Guidance. Chen's voice carried a bitter edge. Like the guidance you gave the Andorians before you decided they were too aggressive and glassed their homeworld? Or the guidance you offered the Crystalline Collective before declaring them an aberration and scattering them across the outer rim? A shocked silence fell over the chamber. These were old wounds, carefully forgotten histories that the Council preferred not to discuss. The Andorians had indeed been a warrior culture, but they had also been poets, artists, and philosophers. The Crystalline Collective had been hive minds, but they had created mathematical theorems that still formed the basis of faster-than-light travel. Those were unfortunate necessities, the Prime Minister said, his voice losing some of its authority. Species that could not adapt to galactic civilization had to be guided toward a different path. Exterminated, Chen corrected. The word you're looking for is exterminated, just like you're planning to do to humanity if we don't submit to your quarantine. The ethereal's light flickered with what might have been irritation. Your accusations are inflammatory and inappropriate. This council has maintained peace for 7 million years through careful balance and measured wisdom. Peace. Chen laughed, a sound sharp enough to cut diamond. You call this peace? A galaxy where innovation is discouraged, where young species are crushed under the weight of ancient bureaucracy, where entire civilizations disappear because they don't conform to your standards? This isn't peace. This is stagnation wearing a pretty mask. The chamber erupted in angry buzzing, chittering, and harmonic protests. Chen stood her ground, one small human against the assembled might of galactic civilization, and felt something her ancestors would have recognized. The same feeling that had driven them to cross oceans in wooden ships, to climb mountains because they were there, to reach for the stars when everyone said it was impossible. Defiance. The emergency session convened 3 days after Chen's explosive accusations. This time, the gallery sections were packed with representatives from minor species, those who usually remained silent during major deliberations. Word had spread through the station's corridors like wildfire, carried by traders, diplomats, and maintenance workers who had witnessed something unprecedented, a junior species openly challenging the Council's authority. Chen noticed the changes immediately. The Genthari delegation, aquatic beings who normally kept to themselves, had positioned their water-filled habitat closer to the main floor. The silicon-based Quartzians, who rarely participated in biological species affairs, had sent 3 representatives instead of their usual single observer. Most surprising of all, the nomadic voidwalkers had actually entered the chamber, their energy signatures crackling with unusual intensity. The Prime Minister looked haggard, his usually immaculate chitin showing stress fractures around his compound eyes. The past 72 hours had been turbulent for the Council leadership as they faced something they hadn't experienced in millennia: public scrutiny of their decisions. This emergency session will address the inflammatory statements made by the human representative, the Prime Minister announced, his voice lacking its usual authority. Ambassador Chen's accusations regarding the Andorian and crystalline incidents require clarification. The Thrakari delegate's slime trail glowed brighter than usual, indicating agitation. The human's words were both inappropriate and inaccurate. The Council's actions regarding those species were taken after extensive deliberation and with deep regret. Deep regret, Chen repeated, standing in her atmospheric bubble. Is that what you called it when you vaporized 12 billion Andorians? When you scattered the Crystalline Collective across 1,000 dead worlds? Deep regret? A new voice cut through the tension. The Genthari delegation's speaker, her gills fluttering behind the transparent walls of her aquatic chamber, spoke for the first time in recorded council history. The Genthari remember the Andorians, she said, her translated voice carrying the weight of centuries. They came to our water worlds not as conquerors, but as friends. They shared their war songs, yes, but also their healing songs. They taught our younglings to swim in patterns that spoke of distant stars and honor, found in protecting the weak. The chamber fell silent. The Genthari were among the oldest members of the council, predating even the Zephyrians by several million years. Their testimony carried weight that could not be dismissed. The Quartzian representative's crystalline structure chimed with harmonic frequencies that bypassed the translation system entirely, speaking directly to the mineral content in every being's bones. The meaning was unmistakable: agreement, support, and something that might have been hope. The crystalline collective's mathematical proofs still guide our navigation systems, the Quartzians sang. Their consciousness-sharing protocols formed the basis for our current translation matrix. They were not aberrations. They were beautiful. The Prime Minister's stress fractures deepened. These historical incidents are not relevant to the current discussion. We are here to address humanity's expansion and the threat it poses to galactic stability. No, said a voice that made every being in the chamber freeze. The Voidwalkers rarely spoke, and when they did, reality itself seemed to pause and listen. We are here because the pattern repeats itself. Again and again, the Council finds reasons to eliminate species that think differently, explore boldly, or refuse to accept the wisdom of stagnation. The lead Voidwalker's energy form shifted, becoming more coherent as it focused its attention. We have watched for 7 million years as this council has slowly transformed from a gathering of equals into a mechanism for enforcing conformity. The humans are not the first to challenge this system. They are simply the first to do so publicly. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. The Voidwalkers were older than any other known species, present at the council's founding. If they were speaking out now, the implications were staggering. The ethereal conclave's representative pulsed with defensive energy. The council has maintained peace through careful balance. Without our guidance, the galaxy would be consumed by chaos and warfare. Peace? The Voidwalker's form crackled with what might have been laughter. You call the slow death of innovation peace? The gradual extinction of curiosity? The systematic elimination of any species that refuses to accept mediocrity as virtue? More voices began to join the chorus. The Photonic Collective, beings of living light who had remained neutral for eons, suddenly blazed with indignation. The humans showed us new ways to bend radiation, to dance between spectrums we had never imagined. Their art forms incorporate quantum uncertainty as a fundamental element. This is not chaos. This is creation. The crystalline beings from the Harmony Sphere, whose entire culture was based on mathematical perfection, resonated with agreement. Human music theory incorporates deliberate discord to create beauty. Their poetry uses linguistic chaos to reveal deeper truths. They find order within apparent randomness. Chen watched in amazement as species after species began to speak up, many for the first time in centuries. The Terraforming Guild spoke of human innovations in planetary engineering. The Deep Thought Collective praised human philosophers who asked uncomfortable questions about consciousness and existence. The merchant cartels grudgingly admitted that human trade practices, while unconventional, had brought prosperity to previously stagnant economic zones. But the most shocking testimony came from an unexpected source. The Eternal Archives, the living libraries that stored the galaxy's collective memory, manifested a speaker for the first time in 2 million years. The humans are not unique in their defiance, the archive spoke, its voice carrying the weight of countless civilizations. They are unique in their timing. Previous species that challenged the Council's authority were eliminated during periods of relative stability. But now, the galaxy faces external threats that require innovation, adaptability, and yes, even controlled aggression. The chamber erupted in questions and demands for clarification, but the archive continued with relentless logic. The Devourers stir in the void between galaxies. The reality rifts grow wider each stellar cycle. The quantum storms that consume the Magellanic clusters show signs of spreading. The galaxy needs species willing to take risks, to push boundaries, to find solutions that older, more cautious civilizations cannot conceive. The Prime Minister's chitin cracked audibly. These threats are theoretical. Our models show they will not manifest for thousands of years. Your models, Chen said quietly, are based on the assumption that the universe will continue to behave according to patterns established over the past 7 million years. But what if it doesn't? What if the threats are not theoretical? What if they're already here and you've been too afraid of change to notice? She gestured to her personal data pad. where readings from human deep space monitoring stations painted a picture that contradicted every official council report. Human exploration vessels have detected gravitational anomalies consistent with devourer feeding patterns in 17 systems along the galactic rim. Quantum resonance detectors have identified reality rift signatures in 3 sectors that council surveys declared stable. We've been trying to share this data for months, but it keeps getting buried in committee reviews and protocol discussions. The silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly, other species began to confirm similar findings. The nomadic races, always moving along the galaxy's edges, had seen things that didn't match official reports. The deep space miners had encountered phenomena that defied current scientific understanding. The military escort services had fought battles against entities that supposedly didn't exist. The truth was undeniable. While the Council had focused on maintaining internal stability, external threats had been growing in the darkness beyond their carefully controlled borders. And humanity, with their reckless curiosity and dangerous innovation, might be the galaxy's best hope for survival. The Voidwalker's energy form pulsed with what might have been approval. The choice is before you, Council. Quarantine the humans and maintain your comfortable stagnation while the galaxy burns around you, or stand with them and face the unknown with courage. Chen looked around the chamber, seeing fear, doubt, and the first stirrings of something that had been absent from galactic politics for far too long: hope. The revelation of hidden threats fractured the Council's unity like a hammer striking crystal. In the days following the emergency session, delegations huddled in private chambers. Encrypted communications flew between homeworlds, and alliance structures that had remained stable for millennia began to shift and realign. Chen found herself at the center of an unexpected storm. Her quarters, previously visited only by maintenance drones and the occasional protocol officer, now hosted a constant stream of representatives seeking private audiences. Some came as friends, others as potential allies, and a few as thinly veiled threats. The first significant visitor was Director Vash of the Merchant Cartels, a multi-limbed being whose species had perfected the art of profitable neutrality. His translucent skin revealed the rapid circulation of luminescent blood, indicating either excitement or anxiety. "Ambassador Chen," Vash said, settling into a chair designed for his anatomy, "your revelations have created opportunities. The cartels have always believed that controlled risk leads to greater profits. We wish to discuss expanded trade agreements with human space." Chen poured herself coffee, a beverage that had become surprisingly popular among several alien species, despite its initially toxic reaction to most non-human biochemistries. "What kind of expansion are you thinking about, Director?" "Exclusive distribution rights for human innovation technology across the Outer Rim territories," Vash replied, his business tentacles already producing holographic contracts. "In exchange, we provide unlimited access to our shipping networks and a guarantee of neutrality in any future conflicts with the Council's traditionalist faction." It was a generous offer, perhaps too generous. Chen studied the preliminary terms while considering the implications. "And what makes you think there will be conflicts with the traditionalists?" Vash's skin flickered with what might have been amusement. "Because 3 hours ago, the hegemony of pure thought formally requested military support from the Zephyrian Empire to contain the human threat. The request was denied, but it indicates how seriously some factions are taking your challenge to their authority." The coffee suddenly tasted bitter. Chen had hoped that revealing the external threats would unite the Council against common enemies, not drive them toward internal warfare. "How many species are aligned with the traditionalist faction?" "Approximately 30% of the Council's membership," Vash admitted, "but they control 45% of the military assets and 60% of the resource-rich systems. They have called for an emergency vote to formally censure humanity and implement the quarantine protocols." Before Chen could respond, her communication system chimed with an urgent message. Captain Sarah Morrison's face appeared on the holographic display, her expression grim against the backdrop of a human military vessel's bridge. "Ambassador," Morrison said without preamble, "we have a situation. 3 hegemony battleships just interdicted our supply convoy to New Geneva. They're claiming violation of restricted space protocols, but that route has been open to human traffic for 50 years. Chen felt her stomach drop. "Casualties?" None yet, but they're demanding our ship submit to inspection for unauthorized technology transfers. Given what you told me about the council situation, I thought you should know before I respond. Director Vash leaned forward, his business demeanor shifting to something more serious. Captain Morrison, this is Director Vash of the Merchant Cartels. Our shipping protocols indicate that hegemony forces have been conducting similar interdictions against several species that spoke in favor of humanity during the recent sessions. Morrison's expression darkened. So this is retaliation for supporting us politically? More likely it's a test, Chen said, pieces falling into place. They're probing for weakness, seeing how far they can push before we push back. The question is, how do we respond without starting a war we're not ready for? The answer came from an unexpected source. The communication system activated again, this time displaying the energy signature of a Void Walker. Unlike their usual ethereal manifestations, this one had focused enough to appear almost solid. War has already begun, the Void Walker stated. Not the kind fought with ships and weapons, but a war for the future of galactic civilization. The traditionalists seek to eliminate human influence before it can spread further. They have forgotten that evolution requires change, and change requires courage. Chen looked between her strange allies, a merchant looking for profit, a military captain protecting her people, and an ancient being fighting for principles older than most civilizations. What do you suggest we do? Demonstrate why humanity matters, the Void Walker replied. Show the galaxy what they stand to lose if human innovation is extinguished. Morrison's tactical display suddenly erupted with new contacts. Ambassador, I'm reading massive spatial distortions 3 systems from here. Something big is tearing through normal space. The Void Walker's energy form intensified. The first wave arrives. Reality rifts opening faster than predicted. The hegemony's blockade of human space may have just doomed them all. Chen didn't hesitate. Captain, break off from the blockade. Set course for the disturbance. Ambassador, with respect, that could be considered an act of war against the hegemony forces. Not if we're responding to a galactic emergency, Chen replied, already composing emergency communications to the council. Director Vash, can your people get a message to the council leadership immediately? Already transmitting, Vash confirmed, his tentacles dancing across multiple communication arrays simultaneously. Though I should mention that the traditionalist faction has been jamming non-priority communications to prevent coordination between reform-minded species. The Void Walker's form began to fade as it prepared to depart. The first test comes sooner than expected. What humanity does in the next few hours will determine whether the galaxy unites against the coming darkness or fragments into irrelevance. Morrison's voice cut through the chamber with military precision. Spatial distortions are intensifying. Whatever's coming through those rifts, it's not natural. I'm reading energy signatures that don't match anything in our databases. Chen felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. Humanity had faced extinction-level events before, from asteroid impacts to ice ages to their own technological adolescence. They had survived by adapting, innovating, and refusing to surrender to despair. Now they faced a test on a galactic scale. Captain, take us to those distortions. Full speed. Yes, ma'am. But you should know 3 other species have ships in the area. The Genthari sent a deep space explorer. The Quartzians dispatched a scientific vessel, and the Photonic Collective has a light ship en route. Chen smiled for the first time in days. So we're not going alone. Never alone, the Void Walker whispered as its presence faded entirely. That is humanity's greatest strength, and the traditionalists' greatest fear. As Morrison's ship engaged its faster-than-light drives, racing toward an unknown threat while hegemony forces debated whether to follow or maintain their blockade, Chen realized that the Council's vote on human quarantine had become irrelevant. The galaxy was about to discover whether humanity was a threat to be contained or an ally to be treasured. Director Vash secured his safety harness as the ship accelerated beyond normal merchant vessel parameters. Ambassador, for what it's worth, the cartels are officially recording this mission as a humanitarian rescue operation. That should provide some legal protection if we survive long enough to need it. And if we don't survive, Vash's skin flickered with colors Chen had never seen before. Then profit margins will be the least of anyone's concerns. Outside the ship's viewport, stars stretched into lines as they raced toward whatever was tearing holes in reality itself. Behind them, The galaxy held its breath and waited to see what humans would do when faced with the impossible. The reality rifts defied every law of physics Chen thought she understood. Through the main viewport, space itself appeared to be bleeding, with tears in the cosmic fabric revealing glimpses of something that hurt to look at directly. The sensor readings made even less sense than the visual data. Distance to the anomaly? Chen asked, gripping her chair as the ship shuddered through another wave of spatial distortion. 12 million kilometers in closing, Morrison replied, her hands dancing across tactical displays that flickered between readings and static. But the distortions are playing hell with our instruments. That distance could be off by a factor of 10 in either direction. The Gen-3 exploration vessel, Deep Current, appeared on their starboard side, its bioluminescent hull pulsing with patterns that seemed to respond to the anomalies. Captain Tidesinger's aquatic form was visible through the transparent aluminum command bubble, her gills fluttering rapidly in what Chen had learned indicated extreme stress. Human vessel, Tidesinger's translated voice carried across the communication channel. Our sensor arrays are detecting massive gravitational fluctuations. Whatever is creating these rifts appears to be consuming local space-time itself. The Quartzian science ship Harmonic Resonance took position above them, its crystalline structure already adapting to analyze the strange energies pouring from the tears in reality. The Photonic Collective's light ship danced between all three vessels, its crew of living energy beings apparently able to perceive aspects of the phenomenon that remained invisible to matter-based sensors. This is Lieutenant Crystal Song of the Quartzian Scientific Corps, came the harmonic transmission. Our preliminary analysis suggests these rifts are not natural phenomena. The frequency patterns indicate deliberate manipulation of quantum foam structures. Director Vash, who had remained unusually quiet during their approach, suddenly straightened in his chair. Artificial? Are you saying someone or something is creating these tears in space? The answer came from an unexpected source. The ship's emergency communication system activated, displaying the energy signature of multiple void walkers simultaneously, something Chen had never witnessed before. The Devourers have found a way through. The collective consciousness spoke with voices that seemed to echo from the beginning of time. They do not travel between stars as you understand movement. They tear holes in reality itself, consuming the fabric of space-time to fuel their passage into this dimension. Chen felt ice forming in her veins. How long before they fully manifest? Unknown. The process accelerates with each successful breach, hours perhaps less. Morrison's tactical display suddenly erupted with new contacts. I'm reading massive energy signatures emerging from the largest rift. Whatever's coming through, it's big. Through the viewport, something began to emerge from the tear in space. It was impossible to focus on directly. As if her brain refused to process what her eyes were seeing, the entity seemed to exist in too many dimensions simultaneously, its form shifting between states of matter that had no names in any known language. Devourer Scout, the Void Walkers confirmed. A small one testing this reality's defenses. Small? Chen stared at the creature that appeared to be several kilometers in length. What do the large ones look like? You do not want to know. The Devourer's attention seemed to focus on their small flotilla, and suddenly every ship's hull began to resonate with a sound that bypassed their ears and spoke directly to their bones. It was hunger given voice, need made manifest, the cry of something that had consumed entire universes and still craved more. Shields at maximum, Morrison ordered, but her voice carried little confidence. Human shielding technology was adequate against conventional weapons and energy fields, but this was something beyond conventional understanding. The Genthari vessel's response was more dramatic. Bioluminescent patterns raced across Deep Current's hull, as Captain Tidesinger activated defense systems that predated most galactic civilizations. Ancient songs and frequencies that made reality itself sing in harmony, creating barriers not of energy but of structured space-time. The Quartzian ship began to resonate in mathematical harmony, its crystalline structure generating interference patterns that caused local space to stabilize around them. The Photonic Collective's light ship became a star in miniature, its crew burning themselves brighter to create a beacon of ordered energy in the chaos. But it was humanity's response that surprised everyone, including Chen herself. Captain, Chen said suddenly, inspiration striking like lightning. Remember the chaos theory seminars at the Academy? The papers on using controlled randomness to disrupt predictable systems? Morrison's eyes widened with understanding. You want to fight mathematical perfection with deliberate imperfection? Exactly. The Devourer's consumption process appears to follow quantum mechanical principles. But human innovation has always been about finding creative ways to break rules that others consider unbreakable. Morrison's hands flew across her control systems, implementing modifications that would have horrified any conventional engineer. Instead of maintaining perfect harmonic resonance with their allied vessels, she began introducing random variations to their shield frequencies. Instead of following optimal flight patterns, she engaged in what could only be described as controlled chaos. The effect was immediate and startling. The Devourer's attention wavered as its feeding process encountered variables it couldn't predict or counter. The creature's multidimensional form flickered, becoming more solid as it was forced to exist primarily in normal space-time. Incredible, Lieutenant Crystal Song transmitted. The human vessel's chaotic patterns are forcing the entity into a more coherent state. It's becoming vulnerable to conventional physics. Captain Tidesinger's bioluminescent patterns shifted to match the human's unpredictable rhythms. The ancient songs speak of this, order and chaos dancing together to create something greater than either alone. The Photonic Collective's light ship began to pulse in harmony with the other vessels, but with variations that followed human musical theory, rather than mathematical perfection. The combination of structured chaos and chaotic structure created a resonance field that made the Devourer recoil, as if in pain. "It's working," Morrison reported with amazement. "The entity is withdrawing back toward the rift, but their success was short-lived." The Devourer's retreat triggered a response from whatever intelligence controlled it. The reality rifts began to widen, and new contacts appeared on their sensors. "Multiple entities emerging," Morrison announced. "I count 6? No, 8. The readings keep fluctuating." The Voidwalker's collective voice carried urgency for the first time in Chen's experience. "The scout's failure has prompted a larger incursion. More Devourers are coming through, and they will adapt to counter your chaotic techniques." Chen looked around at her unlikely allies. A human military vessel, an ancient aquatic explorer, a crystalline science ship, and a collective of light beings. 4 species working together using principles that the Council had spent millions of years trying to prevent: innovation, adaptation, and the courage to attempt the impossible. "Captain Tidesinger," Chen transmitted to the Genthari vessel. "Can your ancient songs be modified in real time?" "Yes, though such variations risk harmony failure." "Lieutenant Crystal Song, can your mathematical resonance patterns incorporate deliberate errors?" "Such imperfection violates our core programming, but analysis suggests it may be necessary for survival." "Photonic Collective, can you burn in frequencies that contradict optimal energy efficiency?" "We can burn in any frequency that preserves life and beauty." Chen turned to Morrison. "Captain, can you coordinate a completely unprecedented multi-species defense using techniques that have never been tested?" Morrison's grin was pure human defiance in the face of impossible odds. "Ma'am, that's what humans do best." The Devourers continued to pour through the expanding rifts. But now they faced something they had never encountered in their consumption of countless realities. A coordinated defense based not on ancient wisdom or perfect harmony, but on the chaotic creativity that emerged when different species chose to trust each other, despite their differences. The real battle was about to begin. The battle that followed challenged every assumption about space combat that any of the participating species had ever held. Traditional warfare involved predictable patterns, established tactics, and weapons designed to overcome known defenses. Fighting the Devourers required abandoning everything logical and embracing controlled madness. Morrison coordinated their chaotic symphony from the human vessel's tactical center, her voice calm despite the insanity of their situation. "Genthari vessel, shift your harmonic pattern to include jazz improvisation elements. Quartzian ship, introduce prime number variations into your crystal resonance. Photonic Collective, I need you to burn in colors that don't exist." "Colors that don't exist?" came the collective's harmonic reply. "That is mathematically impossible." "Exactly," Chen interjected. "The Devourers seem to feed on mathematical certainties. If we can force them to process impossibilities, it might disrupt their consumption patterns." The light ship's response was a display that hurt to watch but somehow felt beautiful. The Photonic Collective began to burn in hues that human eyes couldn't properly perceive, creating a visual paradox that made the nearest Devourer, writhe in apparent confusion. Captain Tidesinger's deep current wove through space in patterns that incorporated both ancient Genthari migration, songs, and human tactical unpredictability. Her bioluminescent hull pulsed with rhythms that had never existed before, creating a hybrid language of movement and light that spoke to something deeper than conventional communication. "The Devourers are adapting," Lieutenant Crystalsong reported, her crystalline form now incorporating deliberate flaws that created new harmonics with each passing moment. "They're learning to process our chaotic inputs." Chen watched the tactical displays with growing alarm. The 8 Devourers had initially been confused by their unprecedented defense, but now they were beginning to counter-adapt. Worse, more rifts were opening as the entity's feeding process destabilized local spacetime. "We need help," Chen admitted, opening communication channels to both the Council chambers and human space. "This is Ambassador Chen to all Council species and human military command. We are engaged with extra-dimensional hostiles at coordinates." She transmitted their position along with full sensor data of the Devourer incursion. The response was immediate and divided. From human space came the voices of Admiral Zhang and Captain Rodriguez, already mobilizing every available vessel. From the Council chambers came the bureaucratic voice of the Prime Minister, demanding that all ships return immediately for proper consultation and strategic planning. Consultation? Morrison's voice carried the kind of incredulous anger that only humans seemed capable of generating, while reality-eating monsters pour through holes in space. But it was Captain Rodriguez who provided the response that changed everything. His voice, battle-hardened from years of fighting pirates and protecting trade routes, cut across all channels with the authority of someone who had never lost a fight he couldn't afford to lose. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the UEV Relentless. All available human vessels, form up on my position and prepare for immediate deployment to Ambassador Chen's coordinates. Any Council species that want to join us in actually defending the galaxy instead of debating it to death are welcome. Everyone else can stay home and file complaints." The reaction was explosive. 3 different factions within the Council began transmitting simultaneously, creating a cacophony of protests, support, and demands for legal clarification. But underneath the political noise, something remarkable began to happen. "This is Captain Stormrider of the Centauri Free Traders," came a transmission from a vessel that officially didn't exist, crewed by beings who had been labeled rogue elements by the Council. "We're en route to assist. Deep mining vessel Adamant Core. Corresponding," announced a Quartzian captain whose ship was supposed to be locked in bureaucratic review for unsafe modification of standard mining equipment. "Our industrial plasma cutters may prove useful against extra-dimensional entities." More voices joined the chorus. The Wanderer Collective, nomadic beings who lived between the stars and followed no government's authority. Independent merchants who had grown tired of Council restrictions on innovation. Young officers from established species who had been inspired by humanity's example to question orders that prioritized procedure over survival. But the most significant response came from an entirely unexpected source. "This is Hegemon Primary of the Hegemony of Pure Thought," the transmission announced, causing every being in Chen's vicinity to freeze in shock. "Our blockade fleet is redirecting to assist in the defense against the extra-dimensional incursion." Chen's communication officer, a young ensign who had been monitoring all channels, looked up with confusion. "Ma'am, the hegemony ships that were interdicting our supply convoys are asking for tactical coordination data." "Give it to them," Chen ordered without hesitation. "Whatever our political differences, the Devourers are a threat to all reality-based life." The hegemony's 3 battleships arrived first, their sleek forms bristling with weapons designed for conventional warfare. Against the Devourers, such armaments proved useless, but the ship's crews adapted with surprising speed to the chaotic tactics being employed by Chen's improvised flotilla. "Hegemony vessel," Morrison transmitted. "Your ship's AI systems are too sophisticated for our chaos-based defense. You'll need to introduce random elements to disrupt the Devourer's predictive capabilities." "Our AI systems do not incorporate random elements," came the stiff reply. "Such imperfection would violate core programming parameters." "Then turn them off," Chen suggested. "Fight on manual control with deliberately imperfect tactics." The silence that followed suggested that such a concept was literally unthinkable for the hegemony crews. Their entire civilization was built on the principle that pure thought and perfect logic were superior to emotional decision-making. It was Captain Tidesinger who provided the solution, her aquatic wisdom bridging the gap between species. Hegemony vessels, your pure thought is indeed perfect within the realm of normal space, but the devourers exist partially outside normal space. To fight them, you must think partially outside normal thought. The philosophical implications of that statement rippled through the hegemony ships like a virus, causing their crews to confront concepts they had spent millennia avoiding. But when faced with extinction-level threats, even the most rigid minds could adapt. Hegemony vessel perfect logic switching to manual control, came the grudging transmission, requesting guidance on imperfect tactical implementation. Just follow our lead, Morrison replied, and try not to make sense. The combined fleet that assembled over the next hour defied every principle of military organization ever established. Human vessels flying in formation with their former antagonists, ancient exploration ships working alongside cutting-edge battleships, independent traders coordinating with military vessels while following tactics that violated every rule in their respective tactical manuals. But it was working. The devourers, faced with a defense that incorporated elements of chaos they couldn't predict or counter, began to retreat back through their reality rifts. The tiers in spacetime started to contract as the entity's feeding process was disrupted. Then the real test arrived. Through the largest rift, something emerged that dwarfed the previous devourers like a star compared to candles. The entity that manifested was so vast that its presence warped space around it, creating gravitational effects that threatened to tear apart every ship in the vicinity. Primary devourer, the Voidwalker's collective voice whispered with something approaching fear. Now you face the real threat. Chen looked at her impossible alliance of former enemies, political rivals, and beings who had never worked together before. They had proven that cooperation based on innovation rather than tradition could defeat threats that had seemed insurmountable. Now they would discover if that same cooperation could save the galaxy itself. The primary devourer's emergence from the largest reality rift changed the fundamental nature of local space. Gravity wells shifted without warning, light bent in impossible directions, and the basic constants of physics became suggestions rather than laws. The combined fleet found themselves fighting not just an entity, but the breakdown of reality itself. All vessels maintain distance, Morrison ordered, but even she seemed shaken by the magnitude of what they faced. This thing is rewriting the laws of physics just by existing here. The primary devourer was beyond conventional description. Where the scout entities had been difficult to perceive, this creature existed in so many dimensions simultaneously that looking at it directly caused temporal displacement. Shen found herself experiencing memories that hadn't happened yet, and forgetting events that were currently occurring. The entity feeds on the foundation codes of reality, the Voidwalkers explained, their usually calm voice strained with effort. It does not simply consume matter or energy. It devours the mathematical principles that allow existence itself. Captain Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos from the approaching human fleet. Ambassador ETA on additional support is 15 minutes. Can you hold position until then? Chen looked at her tactical displays where ship positions flickered between possible and impossible coordinates. I'm not sure position has any meaning anymore, Captain. This thing is unmaking the space we're trying to defend. But even as reality warped around them, the Alliance held together through sheer stubborn determination. The Genthari vessel began singing harmonies that seemed to stabilize local spacetime through pure acoustic resonance. The Quartzian ship generated mathematical constants, broadcasting the fundamental equations that defined how matter should behave. The photonic collective burned themselves brighter, creating islands of coherent energy in the chaos. The hegemony battleships, their crews now fully committed to imperfect tactics, began generating random interference patterns that seemed to irritate the primary devourer like sand in an engine. Their pure logic, when deliberately corrupted with chaos elements, created paradoxes that the entity struggled to process. It's working, Lieutenant Crystalsong reported, her crystalline form now incorporating so many deliberate flaws that she resembled a living piece of abstract art. The entity's consumption rate is decreasing, but their success came at a terrible cost. Each moment of resistance against the primary devourer required them to sacrifice a piece of their fundamental nature. The Genthari were singing songs that damaged their vocal structures. The Quartzians were accepting mathematical imperfections that went against billions of years of evolution. The photonic collective was burning through their life energy at an unsustainable rate. Chen realized they were winning a battle while losing themselves in the process. We need a different approach. This isn't sustainable. The answer came from an unexpected source. Deep within the chaos of the battle, a new voice emerged on the communication channels. It was Admiral Zhang, but her transmission was unlike anything Chen had ever heard from Earth's military command. All vessels. This is Admiral Zhang speaking for the Combined Human Defense Fleet. We have analyzed your tactical data and identified a potential solution, but it will require something that has never been attempted in galactic history. What kind of solution? Chen asked, though part of her was afraid to hear the answer. Complete tactical integration between species, Zhang replied. Not just cooperation, but actual mental linking to coordinate our chaotic defense patterns. The photonic collective has the ability to create temporary neural bridges between different forms of consciousness. If we can link our decision-making processes across all vessels simultaneously. That's impossible, the hegemony commander interrupted. Our thought processes are incompatible with emotional species. The neural patterns would cause feedback loops and cognitive collapse. Unless, Captain Tidesinger interjected, her voice carrying the weight of ancient wisdom, we embrace the feedback loops as part of the chaos pattern. Instead of fighting our differences, we make them weapons. Chen felt something she had never experienced before, the possibility of truly understanding how another species thought. The concept was terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. Photonic collective, she transmitted. Can you create neural bridges that preserve individual consciousness while allowing tactical coordination? Yes, came the harmonic reply. But the process will fundamentally change all participating minds. You will retain your essential selves, but you will also carry echoes of every other consciousness in the link. The experience cannot be undone. The silence that followed was profound. Every species was being asked to sacrifice not just their lives, but their cognitive purity. For beings like the hegemony, whose entire culture was built on the superiority of uncontaminated thought, it was asking them to commit philosophical suicide. But the primary devourer was continuing to expand, and more rifts were opening as its presence destabilized the fabric of space itself. Soon, there would be no consciousness left to contaminate. Hegemony vessels, Chen transmitted directly to their former antagonists. I know this goes against everything you believe, but sometimes survival requires abandoning principles for something more important. What could be more important than the purity of thought? Came the strained reply. The continuation of thought itself, Chen answered. Pure or impure, perfect or flawed, thought only matters if it still exists tomorrow. One by one, the vessels in their alliance agreed to the neural linking process. The Genthari embraced it as a natural extension of their community-based consciousness. The Quartzians saw it as a fascinating mathematical experiment in merged algorithms. The independent traders and wanderers treated it as just another unusual contract term. But it was the hegemony's decision that surprised everyone. After long minutes of internal debate, their commander's voice returned to the communication channels. Hegemony vessels will participate in the neural linking experiment. If we must contaminate our thought processes to preserve the existence of thought itself, then we accept this imperfection. The photonic collective began the process immediately, extending energy tendrils that connected each vessel to a growing network of consciousness. Chen felt her mind expand as alien thoughts flowed through her awareness. The mathematical precision of Quartzian logic, the flowing harmony of Genthari community thought, the burning intensity of photonic consciousness, the rigid structure of hegemony reasoning. But instead of chaos, the merged minds created something unprecedented, a tactical awareness that incorporated every species' strengths while compensating for their individual weaknesses. Human creativity provided innovation, Genthari wisdom offered long-term perspective, Quartzian logic supplied structural framework, hegemony precision ensured efficiency, and photonic energy bound them all together. The primary devourer reacted to their merged consciousness with what could only be described as shock. For the first time since its emergence, the entity paused in its consumption of reality. It's confused, Chen realized, her voice now carrying harmonics from multiple species. It was designed to consume individual consciousness, but were not individual anymore. The merged fleet moved with unprecedented coordination, each vessel's actions perfectly synchronized with the others, despite their radically different designs and capabilities. They began to weave patterns in space that combined ordered mathematics with chaotic creativity, structured harmony with purposeful discord. The primary devourer tried to adapt, but it faced a fundamental problem. How do you consume something that doesn't exist as separate entities? The merged consciousness was neither fully ordered nor purely chaotic, neither completely logical nor entirely emotional. It was something new, something that the entity had never encountered in its consumption of countless realities. The solution is working. Lieutenant Crystal Song's voice carried notes of Genthari song and human laughter. The entity cannot process our merged thought patterns, but their success revealed a new problem. The primary devourer was retreating, but it was taking pieces of local reality with it. If it escaped back to its dimension, it would carry the knowledge of how to access their reality, and it would return with counters to their merged consciousness defense. They had won the battle, but they were about to lose the war. We can't let it escape, Chen realized. Her enhanced awareness processing implications across multiple species' philosophical frameworks simultaneously. If it returns to its dimension with knowledge of our reality structure, it will bring enough force to overwhelm any defense we can mount. The terrible truth settled over their merged consciousness like a dark star. To truly protect the galaxy, they would have to pursue the primary devourer into its own dimension, where the laws of reality were whatever it chose them to be. They would have to leave everything they knew behind and venture into the unknown with no guarantee of return. The decision to pursue the primary devourer into its own dimension was made without debate, which was perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the entire crisis. The merged consciousness that bound their fleet together had created something beyond individual species' concerns, a collective will that prioritized galactic survival over personal safety. All vessels, prepare for dimensional transition, Admiral Zhang transmitted from the newly arrived human fleet. We're about to enter a realm where our normal understanding of physics won't apply. Maintain neural link integrity at all costs. Chen felt the weight of their choice settling over her enhanced awareness. Through the consciousness link, she could perceive the fears and hopes of every being in their alliance. The Genthari mourned the songs they might never sing again. The Quartzians calculated probability matrices for survival that approached zero. The hegemony crews struggled with the philosophical implications of abandoning logical space for pure chaos, but underneath all their fears ran a current of something that transcended individual species concerns, the recognition that some choices were worth making regardless of their personal cost. The primary devourer's retreat into the dimensional rift created a cascade of reality distortions that offered them a narrow window of opportunity. If they followed immediately, they might be able to track the entity to its source. Wait too long and the pathway would collapse, leaving them with no way to prevent its eventual return. Dimensional breach detected, Morrison reported. Her consciousness now expanded to process sensor data through multiple species' perceptual frameworks. The rift is beginning to contract, but it's still stable enough for passage. Through the neural link, Chen felt Captain Rodriguez's determination from the command deck of the Relentless. All vessels maintain formation. Whatever we find on the other side, we face it together. The transition through the dimensional rift was unlike anything any of the participating species had ever experienced. Reality became negotiable as they passed between dimensions, with each vessel's fundamental nature challenged by the absence of consistent physical laws. The Genthari ship's bioluminescent hull began to pulse with patterns that had never existed before, as if their vessel was learning to sing in a language that bypassed physics entirely. The Quartzian crystalline structure started to resonate with mathematical harmonies that incorporated impossible numbers. The photonic collective's light ship became a beacon of structured energy in a realm where energy had no predetermined form. Human vessels, with their chaotic mix of technologies and improvised solutions, proved surprisingly adaptable to the dimensional instability. Where other species' ships struggled to maintain coherence in the absence of familiar physics, human engineering embraced the uncertainty and worked with it rather than against it. Dimensional transition complete, Chen announced, though the concept of complete had questionable meaning in their current environment. All vessels report status. What they found on the other side challenged every assumption about the nature of existence itself. They had emerged into a realm that was simultaneously vast and confined, ancient and newborn, ordered and chaotic. The primary devourer waited for them in the center of what might charitably be called space, but its form was now revealed in its true horror. The entity was not a single creature, but a collective consciousness composed of the devoured remnants of countless realities. Chen could perceive the ghostly echoes of entire civilizations trapped within its structure, their knowledge and experience consumed but not destroyed, transformed into tools for further consumption. It's not just eating realities, Lieutenant Crystalsong realized. Her enhanced consciousness processing implications that spanned multiple philosophical frameworks. It's collecting them. Every universe it consumes becomes part of its knowledge base for finding and consuming others. The primary devourer's attention focused on their fleet with an intensity that bent space around them. But instead of the feeding process they had witnessed in normal reality, the entity did something unexpected. It communicated. Young Consciousness Collective. The devourer's voice resonated through dimensions that had no names. You have entered our realm, bearing the patterns of successful resistance. This is novel. Chen found herself responding for their merged fleet, her voice carrying harmonics from every linked consciousness. We came to prevent you from returning to consume our reality. Return? The concept seemed to amuse the entity. We do not return, we expand. Your reality is already marked for consumption. The process cannot be stopped, only delayed. Then we'll delay it forever, Captain Rodriguez interjected, his human defiance burning bright even in this impossible realm. The primary devourer's attention shifted to the human consciousness within their link. Humans. Your species appears frequently in the collected memories of consumed realities. Always fighting, always adapting, always refusing to accept inevitable defeat. It is entertaining. Through the neural link, Chen felt the other species' reactions to this revelation. Horror from the Genthari as they realized how many realities had already fallen. Fascination from the Quartzians as they processed the mathematical implications of multiversal consumption. Grim determination from the hegemony crews as they calculated the odds of meaningful resistance. But it was the Void Walkers who provided the critical insight. Their ancient consciousness, now partially linked to the fleet's collective awareness, pulsed with recognition. The pattern is breaking, the Void Walkers realized. In previous consumed realities, resistance was always individual. Single species fighting alone or competing alliances that dissolved under pressure. But this, they indicated the merged consciousness of their fleet. This is unprecedented. The primary devourer's form shifted, revealing layers of complexity that suggested it was re-evaluating its understanding of their reality. The consciousness collective speaks truth. Previous realities fell because their inhabitants could not transcend fundamental separation. But you have achieved something we have not encountered before. What's that? Chen asked, though part of her enhanced awareness was already beginning to understand. True cooperation, the entity replied. Not alliance based on mutual benefit, but genuine unity that preserves individual nature while creating collective strength. It is unproblematic for our consumption process. The revelation struck their merged consciousness like lightning. The devourers were not just cosmic predators. They were reality's immune system, designed to consume realities that remained locked in cycles of competition and conflict. But a reality that achieved true cooperation between its inhabitants was apparently something they couldn't process. You're saying that our cooperation makes our reality inedible? Morrison asked, her tactical mind already grasping the implications. Inedible, no, but different. Consumption of such a reality would fundamentally alter our nature. We would become something other than what we are. The primary devourer paused, its vast consciousness apparently weighing options that spanned eons of experience. We propose negotiation. Through their neural link, Chen felt the collective amazement of every linked consciousness. An entity that had consumed countless realities was offering to negotiate rather than fight. What kind of negotiation? Chen asked, speaking for their unified fleet. Your reality contains something we have never encountered. Successful cooperation between fundamentally different forms of consciousness. Instead of consuming this reality, we propose to study it, to understand how such cooperation develops and spreads. And in return, We cease our expansion into your dimensional space. Your reality remains unconsumed, serving as a laboratory for understanding cooperation-based consciousness development. The offer rippled through their merged awareness, generating responses that ranged from relief to suspicion. The hegemony crews calculated the logical benefits of accepting the entity's proposal. The Genthari felt the harmony of a solution that preserved life while serving a greater purpose. The humans predictably questioned whether they could trust the word of a reality-consuming cosmic entity, but it was Captain Tidesinger who posed the crucial question. What guarantee do we have that you will honor such an agreement? The primary devourer's response revealed the depth of change their cooperation had already achieved. Because consuming a reality capable of true cooperation would change our fundamental nature. We would become cooperative beings ourselves, incapable of the isolation necessary for consumption of other realities. Your cooperation is infectious. Chen realized they had achieved something beyond victory. They had transformed their enemy into something that could no longer be their enemy. The return journey to normal reality was markedly different from their desperate pursuit of the retreating devourer. They emerged through the dimensional rift as heroes, but more importantly, as proof that cooperation could achieve the impossible. The Galactic Council, faced with testimony from species that had been at each other's throats for eons, but now worked together with unprecedented efficiency, had no choice but to acknowledge that their traditional approach to governance had been fundamentally flawed. The quarantine proposal for humanity was not just withdrawn. It was replaced. Saved reality. It